What's up, J Fusion fans, and welcome back. Now, this video is actually a reshot of another one that I tried to post earlier, but when I actually posted it, I realized that it wasn't really a good video to begin with. So, anyway, here is a reshot of an analysis of the ending or the final episode of Garo versus Road. Now, of course, to start off, I will be mentioning the major points of the story, so of course, a spoiler warning should be in place. Now, I highly recommend that you watch the final episode of Garo vs. Road first, or if you haven't, do watch the whole series and then come back to this video. Because, like I've said, I will mention a lot of important events and important points in this episode. That's why I am putting a spoiler warning. So, anyway, here we go. Now, the episode begins. Our main protagonist, Senna, is about to cut down the other remaining contestant or the other remaining player in Versus Road, Yosuke. But as Senna puts down his sword, he refuses to do so. So the game's navigator Shuka appears and tells them that the battle isn't over unless one of them dies. But Senna refuses and says that, no, I'm done. I won, fair and square. So Shuka suddenly acts out of character from her typical emotionless and practically robotic, uh, emotion, or rather lack of emotion. But she suddenly laughs and says that this whole game is actually a mistake. She does point this out, and she tries to tell Senna the secret of how Garo chooses its wearer, but without letting her finish the sentence, a sword suddenly stabs through her. And this is where we see the main antagonist, Shosetsu, the man who was behind all of this, the man who was behind the game and caused a lot of deaths in the series, of course. So he destroys Shuka before she can tell everything about Garo's secret. And Senna is challenged by uh, Shosetsu to a duel, and what Shosetsu is trying to do is to get Senna angry. And that anger should fill Senna with darkness, as that's his plan. So, however, of course, while Senna has shown that he has grown in battle, Shosetsu, being a more experienced and a better trained Makai knight, of course, easily defeats Senna. But as Shosetsu was trying to deal the last blow, he is suddenly stopped by Ryosuke. So Shosetsu, seeing that Ryosuke is unable to fight any longer, slits his throat. And that triggers the rage that he's been looking for in Senna, and that allows Senna to release all the darkness within him. And it's the last thing that Shosetsu needed in order to complete his plan, in which he succeeds. So the Garo armor has been finally filled with dark energy. Shosetsu spent 20 years filling the Garo armor with dark energy, and the events of Versus Road helped uh, fill the armor with that inga, or that dark energy, in order to create an armor that is supposedly able to surpass Garo, which is called Veil. So Shosetsu finally completes the armor and wears it. Of course, not before offering Senna one last chance to actually join him in changing the world. But even so, Senna still refuses. And out of nowhere, a portal opens up in the sky, and the Garo sword falls in front of Senna. The sword speaks to him, telling him to draw the sword and become Garo. So Senna tries to pull the sword, and a mysterious golden light shines from the keychain that he wears around his wrist. And that keychain was a memento from Shori, who is Kuon's childhood friend slash best friend, who was also one of the participants in Versus Road. He, however, uh, killed himself in episode 6 after being possessed by a horror, which becomes a catalyst for change within Senna. So Shori didn't want to die as a horror, so he asks Senna to kill him, but Senna still refuses. That's why uh, Shori decides to kill himself. But it seems that Shori's soul lies within that keychain, and therefore somewhat becomes the remaining light that uh, Senna needed in order to actually draw out the Garo sword. So this sets him apart from Shosetsu, who 20 years ago fought to become Garo. However, being filled with so much hate and darkness in his heart, Shosetsu was rejected by the armor and therefore wanted the power to surpass Garo. This is why he created Veil. Now, for this part of the story, I'm going to give an analysis for it. So, Shosetsu actually completes Veil and therefore has the power that he needs to change the world as he sees fit. So, imagine anyone other than Senna winning the game, or should I say winning the game with quotation marks. Now, I do see at least a couple of other characters who would have been able to become Garo, but most of the participants in Versus Road were actually rotten people. So imagine any one of those rotten characters winning the game or become the last man standing. If that happened, there would have been no real victory. You just killed off everyone. And still, Shosetsu would have had enough Inga to create Veil, to create the dark metal necessary for that armor. And dark metal is created as a copy of soul metal by filling Garo with all that Inga. So even if, let's say, other characters have won the battle, they would still be filled with so much darkness that none of them would actually be able to pull out the Garo sword, or the sword wouldn't even appear to them for that matter, because the sword actually appeared before Senna which means he was chosen. Senna still had the heart to not fall into darkness completely. Now, imagine if Senna hadn't pulled out the sword, even if he was chosen, then that would still be a game over, right? So, why was Senna chosen in the first place? So, again, uh, looking at Senna's character throughout the whole series, he was an upstanding young man. He's basically a purely good boy, you know. However, with the events of the game, uh, being exposed to all this violence, uh, most of the time he had no choice but to fight. And as one of the other major characters had told him, Taisuke told him that anyone in this game would be driven mad, and he's right. Senna himself was very much close to madness by the later half of the season, but he still tried to keep his heart in check. That's why he was chosen by the GARO armor. Of course, in order to fight Shosetsu, who's already wearing the dark armor, then of course you would have no choice but to put on the Garo armor, or else you would have been destroyed instantly, and therefore allowing Shosetsu to do as he pleases with the world. So, of course, uh, Senna pulls out the sword and wears the Garo armor and fights Shosetsu. And with the memories of all the major characters flowing into Senna, he absorbs somehow their fighting abilities and their personal fighting styles, which he uses to eventually defeat Shosetsu. Now, this is where the story gets interesting. So, of course, Senna wins, and the armor is removed from Shosetsu. Uh, so, of course, Senna also de-transforms, and they are suddenly out of the virtual world or the Makai world. So, Shosetsu asks one thing from Senna: kill him. But Senna wouldn't do that. Why? Senna says that he's seen enough death and bloodshed. He doesn't want any more of that. While you may think that if you were in Senna's position, you would have killed Shosetsu. I mean, anyone who is in the right mind, so to say, you would do it, right? Because he has hurt so many people. Well, he has killed so many people by actually letting them fight each other to the death. But looking at a Garo lore standpoint, this scene actually makes a lot of sense. Now, for those of you who don't know, it's a classic rule in the Garo universe for a Makai Knight to never hurt a normal human being. So take away that veil armor, and guess what makes that? You know, guess what? Guess what Shosetsu is? He's still human. Down that armor. Now, compared to other dark armors featured in the Garo universe, most of them have corrupted their users. The best example of that would be the original Dark Knight, Kiba. It basically turns you into a horror. However, Veil isn't that kind of armor. While it is technically made of pure Inga, it did not corrupt him to the point that he turns into a horror. In fact, uh, he seems to be unaffected. He became quite powerful, but there was no side effect to it. So when outside of the veil armor, then Shosetsu was still very much human. And even though it may be coincidental for Senna to not kill Shosetsu, it still makes sense again because a Makai Knight is never meant to kill a normal human being. They are only trained to kill horrors. Now, there may have been some exceptions in the series. I can name a couple. So, for example, in Garo Makai Senki, the main antagonist, Sigma Fudo, was killed by Koga Saejima. Well, I guess technically Sigma already was corrupted. You know, he uh, was either going to turn into a horror anyway, so he chose to die while he still had his human consciousness. And another instance would be in Yamio Terasumono with uh, Ryuga Dogai's mother. So, because she had to absorb so much Inga in order to create uh, Zedom seeds or to purify Zedom seeds. So it basically, the Inga that slowly builds up in her body is slowly turning her into a horror, and therefore asks her son Ryuga to kill her while she is still human. But again, those are special cases where uh, the enemy is still consciously human, but their bodies perhaps have been tainted with so much inga that they are practically turning horror. So that's what I thought, or that's how I saw the situation. But again, with Shosetsu, he didn't turn into a horror. He just wore a purely inga based armor, and that was it. So this is where Azami comes in. Now, Shosetsu, for the most part, is seen as the main antagonist of the show, but from what is revealed, it's Azami who is the true villain of the show. Now, being born able to control darkness, she actually gave Shosetsu the idea of the dark metal when they met 20 years ago. So, Azami takes the remaining uh, dark metal from Shosetsu and uses it to kill him. And then she leaves. So after that, Senna takes one last look at the Garo sword, turns his back, and walks away. Now, you may be thinking, like, why would Senna leave the Garo sword, right? So, Azami is still out there, and she has the dark metal. She can basically give it to anyone that she deems would be worthy enough or evil enough to wear the veil armor. But as I've said earlier, Senna has seen a lot of death and bloodshed for the Garo armor. Well, having been Garo at least for this one time, he knew how powerful it is, but he also has seen the tragedy that the armor caused. And he wants none of that anymore. Maybe in a future installment, hopefully this gets a second season, there may be a point that Senna would have to actually accept his fate as Garo in order to stop Azami once and for all. Now, with what we see in this episode is that the Garo armor is sentient. It has a soul. And when the sword appears before Senna, it speaks to him. So, if I were that soul within the Garo armor, this is what I would have been thinking upon seeing Senna walk away. Like, here it goes. So, yeah, you've been Garo. You can walk away for now. I know you're tired of all this death and destruction, but you know that Azami is still out there. There's still a threat to the world. You cannot escape your destiny, Senna. One day, you will have to fight again as Garo. So that's what I would say if I were that soul or that spirit within the Garo sword. So, again, it's not the best ending that many people would think, but it's satisfying in its own way. Now, Garo versus Road, as I've mentioned in my previous video, draws a lot of parallels to Kamen Rider Ryuki. And, of course, the Battle Royale is one big similarity. So, looking at the main protagonist of Versus Road and Kamen Rider Ryuki, let's look at how similar and how different they are. So, both Shinji Kido and Sena Kuon are good-natured young men. However, their differences is that Shinji is often portrayed as an idiot, but Sena isn't. He's a very serious character. He does have lighter moments when he's with Shori, but most of the time he is calm, collected, and even acts as a voice of reason for all the other players that he encounters in Versus Road. He generally tries to help out other players despite the fact that they have to actually kill each other. Now, most of the players that joined Versus Road, they had something that they want. Shuka told everyone that they have the chance to get what they want or do what they want if they win the game. So they have an incentive to fight. However, Senna doesn't seem to have any of it. He's never said anything about wanting to become famous, to become rich or powerful, or anything of that sort. But as he continues to survive, he realizes what he wants. What he wants is to stop the game once and for all. So, similar to Shinji Kido of Kamen Rider Ryuki, he doesn't seem to have anything that he wants. Uh, may, maybe get a better paying job, I guess, but he doesn't look like he wants anything more from, from his life. He seems to be satisfied with what, with where he's at. He actually became a Kamen Rider by accident, technically, and when he fought, he also wanted to fight in order to stop the fighting. When he fights other riders, he tries his best not to get killed, while at the same time not kill anyone in the process as well. It sounds naive, but maybe it's their altruistic natures that make them the main protagonists. Of course, for Kamen Rider Ryuki, many people think that Ren is the better character. He seems to be much more relatable because he has something to fight for, while Shinji doesn't seem to have anything to fight for other than to genuinely just stop the battle. But again, from my standpoint, from how I saw both of them, that's what made them heroes. I mean, Shinji's not the best superhero out there, but he did what he could to save lives, and that's what matters to me. So, same thing with Senna. He might have rejected the power of Garo seemingly, but at least for what he wanted during those moments while he was fighting Shosetsu, and eventually he won, of course. So he somewhat managed to stop the madness that is Versus Road, or at least there's not going to be anyone who's fighting for the Garo armor anytime soon. Given that technically Senna is also the bearer of the Garo title, and you know what? That's what makes Garo versus Road compelling for me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, if you haven't seen Garo versus Road, please watch it. I personally loved it. Maybe some of you would want some that's better, but again, it's a different Garo story. It's not the kind of Garo that many fans know. So it's a new experience. If you haven't seen the Garo series, if you haven't seen anything from the Garo franchise, this can be a good starting point for you. So, uh, yeah. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, guys. If you like it, please do leave a like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget that notification bell so you get the latest from JE Fusion. This has been Philip, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!